Will it make the 0-0 loose? Side by side for the lead. A little contact made as they came out of 4. Here comes the 20 of Almirola. Into 3. He's lower. He gets to the back bumper. Through the short chute. He's going to go for the lead. Onto the front stretch. Riley Herbst is going to win in Indianapolis.
That was the fight for the win. Now, directly behind that, in 4th place was, well, you know, we usually only do this for wins, but we did it earlier in the year for this situation. We're going to do it today. Play the song.
Hell yeah, Riley Herbst. Good job, buddy.
That is right. Shane Van Gisbergen recorded his 2nd ever top 5 on an oval track in NASCAR, and it was at the iconic Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Now, yes, it is the same Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the iconic one that hosts the Indianapolis 500 every single year. The same Indianapolis Motor Speedway that NASCAR has hosted the Brickyard 400 up until 2020. Then they took a 3-year break for the road course, and then they came back to the Brickyard 400, the oval track, the iconic track this year. Formula One has run on the road course before. Indianapolis Motor Speedway, so much history, so much royalty, in a sense, if that was a thing for racetracks. Obviously, as you all know, or if you don't know, then, well, here's some information on it for you. The legendary Indianapolis Motor Speedway is 2.5 miles, which is equivalent to 4.02 kilometers. The turns have 9.2 degrees of banking, all 4 of them. Of course, as I said, known for the Indianapolis 500. And that's really kind of the racing we saw today. I think someone on Twitter described it as the Indianapolis 500 in slow motion. That was a very good description. Now you may be wondering, why was it called that? Well, essentially, what NASCAR did for the Xfinity series, last week we had Pocono, same length track, but different turns, different length straightaways, and we ran the normal intermediate package of engine and aerodynamics, meaning the body of the car and the engine of the car is something we run at Texas, that we run at the Charlotte Oval, Kansas, Homestead, Las Vegas, and that is where it's higher horsepower, you're able to get more speed down the straightaways, and you have to use your brakes to get into the turn, or else, well, you'll wreck. But at Indianapolis this week, and at Michigan, the next race, which is in 4 weeks, by the way, NASCAR decided to run the engine package that they run at Talladega and Daytona and Atlanta, which are super speedways, pack racing, restrictor plate or tapered spacer, whatever they do, they restrict the power to the engine to essentially slow the cars down, but they use the same aerodynamic package that they use at Texas, Charlotte, Las Vegas, the intermediate package. So, essentially, you had the Talladega engine in there, but you had the Texas body, meaning that the aerodynamics were very similar to a 1.5 mile track. If that's confusing for you, I apologize. I can maybe describe it better. I could probably answer more questions in the comments if you got them, but essentially, it was not a full unleash the beast at Indianapolis, and at first I was very disappointed. I'm still a little bit disappointed, not gonna lie, that they did not fully let the beast out of the cage in a sense with these race cars. The Xfinity series cars always produce great racing, and I wanted to see them in full effect today, and honestly, I didn't think they would. The top speed was 170, 175 miles an hour, and the low speed was 158, 160, so not a lot of difference. Not a lot of brakes being used. If anything, you're just tapping it. It's more lifting. What I would compare it to is if you watch the NASCAR Cup Series from 2019 to 2021 on intermediate tracks, it was like that. That is what the actual driving was, where it's low kind of horsepower, you got more downforce than usual, but the racing on the restarts is crazy, but the long runs usually get long and strung out. It's difficult to pass, and the aerodynamics play so much of a factor. But I was pleasantly surprised that aerodynamics did not play too much of a factor today. We saw a good amount of passing, and as I said, what an ending that we saw to this race. As for Shane Van Gisbergen, the reason a lot of you are here to hear about his day, I tried to tell you what the engine package was, what the aero package was, what the racetrack itself was. Well, on top of this engine package, aero package being different, it's the first time that the Xfinity Series has run on the Indianapolis Oval since 2019. And as a result of that, that means it's technically a new track because it's been so long without running that the teams got an extra amount of time in practice. Usually the way it's set up, they split the field in half. Group A gets to practice for 20 minutes, and then Group B goes out later and they practice for 20 minutes. But how it works when it's a new track or a return to a track in this instance is every team can go on the track at the same time, but you get 50 minutes to practice. So Friday that happened, and last time Shane Van Gisbergen got a 50-minute practice session, well, it did not go too well. He crashed in practice at Iowa, and then he crashed in the race. It was his worst weekend in NASCAR. But as for Indianapolis, Shane Van Gisbergen, he survived practice this time. He got 24 laps in, which is a lot at Indianapolis. His best time was a 55.6, so it's a long time to get around this track, and with the restricted engines, it's, once again, he is still learning the track. He's learning how to drive at each and every track, and Indianapolis it really raced similar to a Daytona Talladega more than anything, where you were kind of using the draft, but it wasn't exactly like it because they weren't in a pack today. At Daytona and Talladega, you see 20 cars within 2 seconds of each other, whereas today, the better cars could pull away. They could get 3, 4, 5 seconds ahead, but if you were drafting off someone, you could make a little progress. You could make some moves. So it was different in that sense. As I said back at the beginning of this video, someone described it as the Indianapolis 500, but slow motion. It was similar to that. You saw weaving down the straightaways, guys pulling out of line at the last minute to make passes. So it was kind of similar to that. Shane Van Gisbergen qualified 23rd, and by turn 3, he was in 11th place. Oh my goodness, he must have put together an insane first 2 corners. Well, not exactly. He had some help when Sam Mayer, who many of you remember from last week, decided to spin out and take out a good chunk of the field. So that was a big help in that instance. But 23rd is better than where Shane Van Gisbergen qualifies usually. At his first time at a new oval, he usually qualifies on the back half of the 20s or even the early 30s. But today, as I said, with it being kind of like a super speedway where you're on the throttle for the majority of the lap, he's kind of gotten used to this. He's kind of raced this style of racing before. He's raced this kind of thing before. So it was unfamiliar in terms of the track because he does technically have experience at Indianapolis, but it was on the road course last year in the Cup Series. But it was different, but also kind of something he's done before. As I said, it's very complicated, and I've overstated it, I feel like. But as I said, by turn 3, he was in 11th place, restarted 11th. He lost a couple of spots there, fell back to 13th, and kind of just sat in 13th until lap 17. When there was a caution for a car that was involved in that lap 1 crash, Chandler Smith, he stopped on the racetrack because his fuel pressure went out, likely from damage sustained in the crash, if I had to guess. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen and a bunch of other cars opted to pit at this time, meaning that they showed up in the mid-20s, late teens. So Shane Van Gisbergen restarted 25th, and tires actually made a bit of a difference. I was thoroughly surprised. Shane Van Gisbergen was able to make his way up through the field and actually finished in that first stage 16th. Not too bad. Usually in that first stage, he's finishing 23rd to 28th. So a 16th, he'll take that at a new racetrack. And then stage 2 started, I should say. And I was a little bit surprised by this call, but Bruce Schlicker called Shane Van Gisbergen back down to pit road at the beginning of the stage under that caution, got 4 fresh tires, but he was able to come out second or third out of those guys who had pitted. And as a result of that, he restarted 18th or 19th, I want to say, and he was able to make up some positions. As I said, he had fresh tires. Fresh tires actually mattered in this race. Able to get a good restart, and he slowly crept his way towards the top 10. And he was in the top 10 for the back half of this race, and even more, honestly. He sat in that 10th place for the majority of stage 2, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, he's going to do it. Shane Van Gisbergen's going to get himself a stage point on an oval. And then a caution came out with 5 laps to go in the stage, and I was like, oh my God, how is he going to get wrecked? How is he going to get wrecked this time? Well, he did not. Now, almost the entire field pitted, all but 2 guys. Ryan Sieg, who needs the points, needs the stage points in order to make the NASCAR playoffs, and Leland Honeyman, who not really sure why he stayed out. Anyway, Shane Van Gisbergen was able to pit, and he came out 7th, actually, out of the pit lane, but with those 2 cars that stayed out, he restarted 9th, and he was able to make up a couple of positions. It was a 1-lap shootout for the stage, and Shane Van Gisbergen got 4 whole stage points today. 4 stage points. I think the only stage points he scored on an oval this year have been on the super speedways and Indianapolis. Indianapolis, it's like the hybrid. It's so weird. I don't know what to call it because it races so similar, or the engine is so similar to a super speedway, but it races not like a super speedway. I don't know what to call this thing, honestly. Anyways, 4 whole stage points for Shane Van Gisbergen, and with Ryan Sieg winning the stage, he opted to pit at the end of the stage. So in stage 3, Shane Van Gisbergen started 6th, and he got up to 5th on that first restart. Then there was a caution, and he sat in 5th, like for the next 20 to 30 laps, and then it happened. A caution with 15 laps to go. And it seemed like, oh my goodness, this race is going to get out of control, but it did not. But Shane Van Gisbergen and a bunch of other cars made the decision to pit. Remember earlier in this video, I told you tires actually mattered in this race. And Shane Van Gisbergen, while yes, track position is great, being in the top 5 is great, he wasn't as good as some of those guys in front of him. Riley Herbst, Cole Custer, the 2 guys that dominated the day. Even Eric Almirola, who was having a really good day. He wasn't quite as good as them. So let's get some fresh tires on this thing. See if we can make a charge. Get some cautions to fall our way. See how this goes. Well, Shane Van Gisbergen, because he was one of the first guys to pit, he was one of the first guys to come out of pit road. He came out of the pit second to Austin Hill. So the first 3 cars stayed out, and then positions 4 through 11 were, oh my goodness, the randomness. BJ McLeod was in there. Leland Honeyman was back in there. Connor Daly was back in there, and some other random drivers who I would have never guessed. But Shane Van Gisbergen restarted 13th on this final restart. And oh my goodness, I don't know if I have a replay of this thing, but Austin Hill, who was directly in front of SVG on this restart, he just bullied his way through Connor Daly, just forced his way in there, and Shane Van Gisbergen tucked in line and said, I'm following you, buddy. I am following the gap. I'm following the faster car on fresher tires. It worked out very well for him. Austin Hill and Shane Van Gisbergen were working together to make up positions, which I know shocks a lot of you because Austin Hill and Shane Van Gisbergen have had their run-ins this year. But Shane Van Gisbergen was actually able to get ahead of Austin Hill, and then he was the first car on new tires, and he was slicing and dicing through the field, and next thing you know, he's back in the top 5. The only problem is the top 3 had really run away from the pack, so he was able to make up one more spot and get himself a 4th place finish. His second best result of the year on an oval, and I would say this was a better race than that Atlanta race where he finished 3rd. Atlanta, he ran 12th to 15th most of the day, and then everyone ran out of fuel at the end and he just squeaked up into 3rd. But this was different. He ran top 5 for the last 40-ish laps of this race. Even with the pit road strategy, being in the teens for a couple of laps, he was essentially top 5 the majority of the back end of this race, and it was a little bit more deserved in my opinion than that. It's his best oval race to date, arguably. Obviously, a 4th place result, running in the top 5 for a good chunk of this race, almost the entire 3rd stage, running in the top 10 for the majority of the race. It was a great sign of improvement. I know we don't go do anything like Indianapolis again. I know Michigan, it's going to be similar with the engine and the aero, so maybe, you look at that, but Michigan is a completely different racetrack. Much more banking, maybe a little bit higher speed, maybe not. But yeah, Michigan could be different. But as I said, 4 weeks. We do not race again until August 17th. It's almost a full month. I don't know what I'm going to do with my time, honestly. We got the Brickyard 400 tomorrow. That should be fun. But then after that, man, I don't know what I'm going to do for 2 weeks without NASCAR and 3-4 weeks without the SVG recaps. It's going to be a wild time. But Shane Van Gisbergen picks up his second ever top 5 on an oval, his 5th top 5 of the season, of course, from the 3 wins at Portland, Sonoma, and Chicago. Atlanta earlier in the season was the 3rd place finish, and today a 4th place finish. He picked up stage points. He finished in the top 5. Great all-around day. Great learning experience. Great being up at the front of the pack. The super speedway racing, it's the easiest type of racing to adapt to, in my opinion, because we see so many wild and wacky winners at Daytona and Talladega. But with today, as I said, I know we had the Talladega Daytona engine, but the racing just was not really exactly the same. So it was a completely different animal at times. So great performance by Shane Van Gisbergen. What a win by Riley Herbst. His second career win. First one came at his home track of Las Vegas. Second one comes at Indianapolis, one of the most iconic tracks in the world. And what a way to win in that thrilling fashion. Stewart-Haas Racing picks up a win in their final trip to the Brickyard. Riley Herbst continues to improve his stock, in my opinion. Eric Almirola, his first ever race back in the Xfinity Series in quite a while. And then we saw Cole Custer, the defending the defending champion and last week's race winner, finish second. So 1-2 for Stewart-Haas. Great day for them. They led 77 out of the 100 laps. Sheldon Creed with another top 5. Daniel Dye with the top 10. Allmendinger in the top 10. Josh Williams, the only one to not get a top 10 because he got wrecked because Anthony Alfredo just kind of went down in front of the entire field. Anyways, this does help Shane Van Gisbergen's case to make the top 10 of the driver standings. As I said earlier, if he can get into the top 10 of the driver standings, he will get bonus points for the NASCAR playoffs. He currently sits at 17 bonus points. So we will see what he can do. If he can win some more road courses, if he can win a stage at a super speedway, Daytona maybe, Atlanta maybe. We will see how that ends up going. But thank you for watching this video. Great day for the 97 team. Both the 97 and the 98. What a day. But Shane Van Gisbergen, the first one to not be involved in that epic finish. So those top 3, when they were 3 wide, he might have been thinking a little bit, wreck. Maybe not. I doubt it. But, if it did happen, he would have been the first one to benefit. So anyways, thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next video. Tomorrow we will talk about the return of the Brickyard 400, the return of the Indianapolis Oval to the NASCAR Cup Series.